All right, welcome to Sunday Letters. I'm Larry Maguire, psychologist, work psychologist, writer, uh, lecturer, and so on. This is Dimitri, philosopher, my friend, Dimitri Belkov. We write and we create content here, video content, audio content, on the nature of work and the meaning and purpose of work and why we do it and so on. And one of the major reasons why we do it, some people, a lot of people would say, is to earn money, to pay bills, and to buy stuff and to live and so on. We've made it an intrinsic element aspect of what it means to be alive, what it means to exist and to relate to one another. This whole idea of money. And we're going to talk about that today. But before we get into that topic, a little bit about Sunday Letters. It's been going since around 2015 in one form or another. Been writing newsletters to readers and so on. As I said, we talk about work. We're trying to figure out how to work better, how to work according to our own needs and wants and designs and so on, rather than someone else's. Work for a lot of people is degrading. It's abrasive. It wears us down. It's something we have to do. We're obliged to do it. If we didn't have to work for money, we'd probably be doing something else. There's a survey we've been running here on Sunday Letters for a while, getting your feedback. If you would like to contribute to that survey to tell us a little bit about why you work, there's a link below. You can also support Sunday Letters by becoming a paid subscriber. It's about $5 a month. You can often get it for a lot less than $4 with discounts and so on that we include in episodes from time to time. You can also buy some merch. There's a link below again to buy the Sunday Letters mug and a tote bag and a few other bits and pieces. And if none of that floats your boat, well, you can just offer us a tip for any given episode. Again, there's a link below. And you can catch this material primarily on Substack. It's sundayletters.substack.com. And YouTube, you can catch the video over there. And all major podcast platforms, you can catch the show. So this week, we're talking about money and its essential nature. It's ubiquitous nature in everything we do. You could say, Dimitri, that it forms our thinking and our judgment about people as well, doesn't it? If we talk
Yeah,
about money, if I lend you $20 or €20, and you tell me you give it back to me next week and you don't, I'm a bit upset about that, or maybe you don't give it back to me at all. And so it seems to be a measure of our character as well, whether we deliver on our commitment based around money and so on. What are your broad thoughts about money? What it is, where it came from, and so on. What is this stuff we use?
yeah, it's interesting topic about money. So it's rather broad, and I'm still trying to figure out all the small details about it. But eventually, it all started from the well, not started from him, but one predominant theory which circulated like for quite large span of our lives and centuries was so-called metalist theory of money. And it states that money is kind of a medium of exchange. It has itself intrinsic value. And so what does it mean? Let's say, uh, well, people thought previously, and I suppose even Adam Smith in his book Wealth of the Nation, he mentioned the fact that money didn't exist in ancient times, and how people exchanged the commodities between themselves was basically the method of barter.
Mm,
So what does it mean? I give you a product or commodity, and you give me another commodity. But people soon realized that it's not a convenient method of exchange, because let's say I have an item or commodity and nobody needs it, for example, so I cannot exchange it. So we need to come up with some solution, like
yeah.
to create a commodity which everybody needs and everybody can exchange for any other item around. And so this is according to this theory how money was created. So what is it called? To solve the solution of double coincidence of needs. So yeah.
So,
to resolve.
I remember I've seen a few documentaries on the topic, and is it right to say that kings created money? They created metal money, coins, in order to reflect their wealth, or to what was the story there? This is where the metalist theory comes from, isn't it? Metalist
Well,
theory.
this actually, yeah. So they started to later on to issue this metal coins. But the funny fact is that now anthropology sees that there is no correlation, or only probably slight correlation, that this money was somehow showed the real value of the money. And what I mean by that, we used to think about money that, for example, I give you $1 or €1, and let's say for that €1 we attach this €1 value for, let's say, 1 gram of gold, and so we mint the tokens, the coins,
Mm,
let's say, trying to make it weight as like 1 gram, for example. But
yeah.
anthropologists now found evidence that that wasn't the case. So that this money wasn't actually didn't have the exact weight for this amount. So they were just randomly printed
Were
without
shaving
any.
off, weren't they? The kings were shaved. The king was shaving off the outside of the coin, or people would do it themselves. They'd steal from
Yes,
the coin.
yeah, they're gonna cut the coin in half. So there was no actually method how to check the weight of the coin, and nobody pretty much cared.
Mm,
So that's why they later started to do this coin with ridges, so that you can see that the coin
yeah.
is intact.
Mm,
But yeah, it was just you can use any currency basically. It doesn't matter. Is it coin, or probably you can use a salt, or I don't know, even was the story that nails figured in this as a medium of exchange as well.
mm,
Although some of this theory were debunked later on. And yeah, but the main idea that, according to Adam Smith, money came from the markets. So markets created money. So when we engaged in this trade relationships with other people, so we had to come up with a solution how to make this exchange more liquid, more convenient for us, and so that's how money appeared. And yeah, exactly. Well, for this reason, the money has intrinsic value. Then it's like a third commodity through which every transaction can take place, in the
yeah.
economy.
We might get into the various theories of money, but we do intend to bring in some experts, and we have a couple of people lined up to talk with us about what money is and the various theories of monies and so on. Fiat money, digital money, because we've got the paper stuff, that's great, and the coins, uh, albeit it's becoming less prominent now since COVID, because we've been pushed more towards digital money and using cards. I often feel sorry for the people who rely on cash, the older generations, and also the people who live on the street,
Yeah,
or live on the fringes of our society, who rely on you and me walking by to give them a couple of euro so they can buy whatever it is they're buying. I mean, it might be drugs, it might be cigarettes, it might be whatever it is, it might be a sandwich, whatever. But they don't get that now.
yeah,
At best, they might get you or I, a kind you or I, to go into the shop and actually get them a cup of tea and a sandwich or something. But that's gone as well. So there's paper and coin, metal money. There's digital money. There's most of it's invisible, though, isn't it?
yeah,
Isn't that right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
my understanding of it, my kind of lay, simplistic understanding is when I want a loan, and we've been trained into this idea that in order to have money, we got to either earn it through our blood, sweat, and tears, our labor,
yeah,
selling our bodies and selling our minds. Marx had a lot of ideas around this. Or we borrow it. And
yeah,
a lot of people borrow to live, and we live in this constant atmosphere of debt. Get into that a little bit. And so when I want a loan for a car, I'm convinced that this new car will make my life better, right? And
yeah,
improve my lot. And I'll have reached a particular status if I get this car that I've seen advertised on the telly. So I go into the bank and they say, yeah, we have a look at your financials and you can afford this loan. here you go, here's a contract. You signed a contract. And then they gather all up these documents and they put them together and they enter them into their system. And they've got all these 50 grand loans or 30 grand loans or whatever it happens to be. And then they take all these contracts and they go to the central bank and they say, we've got these 10,000, 20 grand loans, whatever that is, do the sums, 10,000, 100, 100 grand, whatever it is. I don't know. Quick maths. I'm not very good at it. So the central bank go, grand, no problem, here you go. And they send them the money and then they do the same and they put it into your account. And so all of a sudden now you're in debt.
Yeah.
But what really happened here, my understanding of it is that the money was created by virtue of your signature.
Mm.
So where's the debt?
So
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah,
So
I know what you mean.
where is the debt? Somebody just did this and created it on a computer. It's not just created out of thin air.
Yeah, but we need to get back to that other theory, that the opponent of that theory I was talking about just a minute ago. So it is more convenient to see the money through just an abstraction, creation of a state, just for the purpose of the creating work and production. So if Adam Smith was talking about that markets produced money, so it's kind of a natural event which emerges between people when they make a transaction, exchanging
So
commodities.
fiat money created by the state.
Yeah, well, they even think the proponents of the theory that this money war existed even prior to fiat currency. It existed even like in ancient times. So the state enforced kind of use of money. And I read even one story about the Chinese emperor or something. They used like wooden bark or whatever, just to use it as a main method of payment within their country. And well, of course, they marked them, denominated in some, I don't know,
Yeah.
they had a value for them. Let's say like, I don't know, $10 or whatever, depending on what bark you have there.
Mm.
But yeah, the point is that it's basically a token that the government at some stage will accept it as a payment of your tax, basically. So, and how it works, it seems like why would people work if somebody will come up to me and you and say, and I think it also relates to modern monetary theory as well, because they kind of develop this theory from their viewpoint, later on might modify it. And if the government come to us or somebody come up to us and say like, listen, you need to, I don't know, clean my room or whatever, work, produce something, and I give you, let's say, 1,000 euro, and you say like, what euro is, like, I don't need it. I mean, who cares? This is just a paper. But then the government will say, well, if you want, you can just skip the job, but in the end of the month you owe me like 20% of like $100. You need to pay me $100, and all of a sudden this currency uh, gets its value from just this statement, that now you have to pay your government, your state, which is basically the power that you cannot reject. And now you need to get this money, you need to get euro. But how do we get it? The only method is just to engage in this relationship, work relationship and production relationship. And so it is a convenient way for the state was to engage people in this production. And so the state actually created the markets. It's not that, if you now can see the difference, like what Adam Smith told, that the markets they kind of get rise to the money, but no, it was the opposite. So the state implemented money in order to spark and sort of bring up those traded relationship markets working and all that stuff, just in order to get this money to repay the government. And so in this relationship, it's the money seen as a debt. Yeah, so they don't have any intrinsic value in them. They're just used as a unit of account, measure of account, money of account, they call it. So they are given, it's a promise of the government, basically, that they're going to accept it as a payment of your taxes, yeah, your liabilities.
Mm.
in the face of the government. And so in the bank, most of the cases, well, central bank is just an issuer of the credit on behalf of the state, in a sense.
Okay. So then we come to the point that what happens when you can't pay it back?
Yeah, well, you have to. There is no point. But although I read that it was a case in history that when people couldn't repay their debt back, and most of the time, some governments, some states, they just wrote off this debt in a sense, so that they could dismiss it and start all anew. So there was some flexibility there.
I often
And
wonder what's going on there when a government decides to just write it off. Don't worry about it, and it's gone. You know.
it's also what the case, because it's already all on the moral side of the story, because throughout the history, and especially in church and in Christian religion as well, the sort of usury, it was kind of
It was frowned upon,
what do you
wasn't it?
call it? Yeah, it was frowned upon, condemned in a sense, and so people, were pretty afraid, how to get a lot of interest out of the loan, and sometimes, yeah, they were written off. And then the also funny story that many rebellions, when the rebel starts, and the first thing they wanted to do is to get to those books, with the debt, and
Yeah.
burn them down,
Yeah.
just so, yeah.
Didn't they
So
do that in France in the French Revolution? Everybody's debt was written off, or a lot of people.
yeah, I think in Turkey it's interesting about. I think it's Turkey. I read about that. They still have this kind of moral code that usury is pretty much bad. So you can make a loan, you can give a loan and expect to get a profit of it. But they have a weird workaround about this problem. They kind of sign a business contract. It's not kind of relationship. I'm a creditor and you're a debtor, but rather we are business partners and we just having this kind of trade
Okay.
relationship. So they
Interesting.
kind of manage to get rid of this moral responsibility in their religion. But then if you think about it, in the 19th century, it's probably fortuitous that that when Nietzsche proclaimed the death of God, and so all of a sudden morality, this Christian morality, started to lose its weight in the people relations. And probably then you see exactly that period of time, 19th century, the dawn of the capitalism, and all of the sudden usury became normal, because the morality already, the Christian morality, started to lose its weight, in building, moral conduct among the people. And probably
Yeah,
from
but
that point,
there's something interesting around that moral aspect. It's like, who am I? What's my worth? Who who's my boss? Who am I beholden to? My whole sense of self and my value and my worth, and my relationship with other people is built upon my ability to pay back this debt, this apparent money that I borrowed. But when I think about it, well, two things. First of all, I came to the realization through my own particular experience that was a nonsense. There's this whole idea. Okay, full disclosure, I found myself in a bad situation where the business failed and the business couldn't repay the debt, the obligations
yeah,
that it had committed to, and I couldn't. Well, for a start, the business wasn't separate from me. Me and the business was the same thing, and so I struggled with this idea that, holy shit, this is all going tits up here, and I can't repay the people that I owe here, and that was a real challenge. And I came to the conclusion that either I separate myself from that, or I fucking die. I mean, this
yeah,
uh, moral obligation. It's more than a moral obligation. It's almost like you give up the right to live and you become psychologically and emotionally chained to this debt. But to what point? I mean, banks, uh, creditors, um, everyone to whom the money is owed can take you through the courts, pursue you personally, can take in some states, maybe not in Ireland, but I know in America, you can be put out of your home. They can take everything from you. They can strip you down to your bare bones. And if you survive, um, it's a miracle almost. And I mean,
Yeah.
really survive, because I wonder I wonder sometimes how much punishment is enough before we say, okay, it's all right now. They suffered enough. They've repaid. So since when is the emotional and psychological and physical suffering of a human being sufficient
Excuse me.
sufficient to pay, so to speak, what is owed? So there seems to be this attached to this idea of debt and obligation, and the moral obligation is this idea of suffering. So if they suffer enough, well, then now they've repaid. It's okay. They're on the brink of debt, as in death, death, physical death.
Yeah.
They're on the brink of it. And I wonder, is it the same word, debt, debt, and death, as in you're gone? To what extent, how close can we take this individual to the brink, to the edge of their own life before we say it's okay? Take them down off out of the noose, bring them back from the edge of the cliff. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
But you see, yeah.
and I, just to finish off on this one, I came to the realization that this is nonsense. That I need, in order for me to survive and to live on or whatever, and to work and to be productive, I've got to step back from this idea and allow this thing to just work itself out. And so, other people I spoke to around the time who were in a bit of trouble as well. That was around 2008, 2009. They were in a similar boat, and we had a conversation, me and another chap, and there was no way he wasn't going to pay back what he apparently owed. I said, I can't do this. If I continue like this, I'm going to be destroyed. Do you see what I mean? So this has a
Yeah.
detrimental effect. And here's another story. It has a detrimental effect on our well-being and so on. And something is more important, our survival and our thriving and so on, our existence in the world is more important than some apparent debt that we owe.
Yeah.
So credit card companies, forget it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Even, well, in Ireland they can't throw you out of your house. You have to come up with an arrangement. But oftentimes banks just write off the debt, like you were saying, and then you just carry on. In the States, if you're bankrupt, you can start again pretty much straight away. It might reflect, or you might feel that it reflects on you poorly for a short period, but business people and corporations understand, they seem to have a different relationship with debt than
Yeah.
you and I. It's okay to take you and I to the brink of our own lives, to the edge of our lives, but with corporations, just can just go, it's just business, we move on, and they survive, and oftentimes they get bailed out, which is what happened in 2008, 2009. The banks were bailed out, but the citizens weren't. The citizens actually bailed out the banks, and we didn't reap the benefit of that. So we live in this capitalist society where debt is celebrated at one level, and then at another level it's a whole other thing. It's like it's your moral obligation. Your right to exist and live and survive is built upon your ability to pay back this debt. But a corporate level, it's not. You can get away with it. There's another set of rules.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to outline that, because I think it's important. So like this dual level of morality exists. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. It's basically interesting because if I'm referring now to Graeber, to his book, I've just started to read it, but even in the beginning, he said that relationship actually existed long time ago. So it was basically the main transaction among the people. But It can exist only in a small, towns or small population, among small amount of people living in one place. If we talk about globalization, it's uh, it's hard to uh, live without money. That's what I mean. In a small village, let's say I know you, and we have a transaction. You, for example, need something from me, and I don't have anything to give you at the moment. Like we don't exchange like a barter system. You don't give me a cow, I give you 20 chickens, for example.
Mm.
So how it works, for example, you give me a cow, and later on you say, you owe me. Like for example, I need something like in months period or whatever, so I will come back to you and probably I will ask you for a favor or something. So people were used to live like that. So
They
they
figured it
were,
out.
yeah. But then, then in a broader, system like global, we live now, it's almost impossible because nobody knows each other in a sense. Like I can probably know my neighbors, but and this state serves as a guarantor, for example, for our exchange.
Mm.
So he's trustworthy, so he issues the note. But the point I'm making, as you mentioned, that corporations, the guys basically who had money, who has money now, uh, they have a different relationship. So the debt can be renegotiated only if two equals, interact. So let's say me and you, I owe you some favor or some amount of money, and well, money, it's basically a promise from you to repay me, so you owe me something. And for example, you can fulfill your obligation in certain date, like give me back the loan I've given you back a month ago, probably 2 months ago. uh, and if we are equal, you can say, well, hold on, Dimitri, can you wait for example 1 week or 2 weeks? We will manage, me, I say, well,
Yeah.
yeah, no worries. We, we'll probably drink beer together. I know you. I have trust you.
Yeah.
It's fine. But when it comes to giving the loan to the people who are not equal, who are inferior than you, so then it's not, this system doesn't work. So if they fail to pay you back their debt, so they're not given any second chance. We don't negotiate with them, but
Okay, so this is a power
renegotiate.
thing. This is a power thing then.
This is power dynamics, yeah. Basically,
In order
if you're
to maintain my power over you, I'm going to beat you up. I'm going to threaten you with the loss of your life and your home and your goods and all the rest of it. I'll take your wife and your first child if you
yes.
don't pay me back.
So the idea, yeah, if you're not my equal, you're not the same class as I do, so you're gonna pay me no matter what. I don't care about your problems.
Mm.
I don't drink beer with you, so it's don't play golf with you, yeah. And so
It,
you have to pay this money. And it's interesting because I also read about it. There was a mention that some people, even in our countries, there is the system. In Ireland as well, the commercial bank provide you with what they call it, like small loans, just for people who are probably struggling. They can go there and get a couple of grants,
yeah,
just
credit union.
yeah. And it seems like most banks just have a huge amount of interest attached to that. In some countries, I read about 20-30%. You
Mm.
know, and here in Estonia, I remember back in the days, probably 20 years ago, we had a bank who could give you a loan. They wouldn't check even your credit history, but you have to repay almost like 50% back, on top of
Wow.
that,
Mm.
of top on the
That's
principal,
despicable. Like there are rules around that kind of stuff, surely.
Yeah, and so people just sometimes taking this money and yeah, they're stuck. They owe even more, then you have to. Can you imagine you took like 1,000, you need to repay like 1,500 already,
Yeah.
and so it's like dubious solution for me at the very least.
Well, it's not dubious if you're the bank. I mean, it's great, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
You just put people in this kind of perpetual debt cycle,
yeah.
and you make their lives miserable. I mean, and it's the same here. I don't know if you have it in your country, but uh, there's this uh, there's this company. I won't mention them because it's not worth giving them a plug, but uh, they target the elderly. So your parents, once you're over 55, 60, well, can't remember the age, you can release equity from your home,
Hmm.
to do things, to maybe give to your kids to buy a house themselves or whatever it is you want to do. You have your mortgage paid off, you have this asset, it's not earning anything. So the bank come along and say, we'll give you 100 grand or 50 grand or whatever, but you hand them the deeds, and you don't pay us anything until after you're deceased. So you think this is great, but the problem is the interest is building all the time you're alive, and by the time you die, you might have borrowed 100 grand, but now you owe them your house. They take the whole lot, and so when your
Yeah.
estate is liquidated, the bank have everything.
Yeah.
And there are several people that got on the radio show. There's a radio show here, Joe Duffy. I don't know if you know, but giving out about this, or not giving out about it, but outraged by what this bank is allowed to do. The financial system enables them to do this. It's complete manipulation and coercion and taking advantage of those in a more difficult situation, simply for profit. I mean, it's
Yeah.
despicable, is it not?
Yeah.
It's
And they also bank, they resell this debt. I know, all those, what do you call them? Collection, companies.
yeah.
When the banks, they just gave up on already reaching you by
Mm.
phone or whatever, by emails, they're gonna sell this debt to the company
Oh, I know.
with
I've been
their
there. I've been
yeah.
there.
And that company already at another percent interest on you, and so
Right.
in the end you owe them a huge amount. But that's the funny thing, because it happened to me, basically, that we were talking about the debt being written off at some stage, and it happens really in nowadays as well, because the companies, if they went bankrupt, the debt is pretty much written off. The only thing that people lose is they're just starting capital,
Yeah.
they're losing so they don't owe bank anything. But then another story, even me as a consumer, I think when I left Estonia back, like, what, 14 years ago, I had a debt on my account as well. But that's a funny thing. When I returned, this debt existed on my account. So all my accounts here in Estonia were arrested in banks. So I couldn't use money until I repaid this debt. But however, there's a law. After a certain amount of years, like 10 years, this debt, you can write it off. If you
Yeah.
go to the solicitor, he can fill in forms, and basically nobody pretends nobody wants to get your money anymore. And it's some kind of interesting for me, because if you stay in the country, you should repay. So if you manage to live within this 10 years and do not repay this money to the bank, after 10 years it's going to be written off. But the easiest solution is to go somewhere else, to live
Yeah.
there, spend some time, get back, to write it off, and go on with your life, go on with your living. But it still points out that sort of unnecessarity of the money, because if they write it off, so it means, like, it's not important, really. I
What was the
mean,
point in the first place?
yeah. What's the point? I mean, you're giving me yeah. So the whole system is work kind of on this trust, on our acceptance of this money. So an acceptance of the system. Well, it's how it seems to me at this stage. Uh,
But it's
in my
kind of a
investigation.
pseudo arrangement, because you talk about the trust between me and you. If you and I enter into an arrangement, I borrow €20 off you, and I give it back to you next week or next month or something like that. That's a reasonable arrangement for you and I to make. Or maybe it's 20 chickens for a cow, or whatever happens to be. Or maybe I borrow a chicken off you or whatever. But that's okay, because we have a human interaction. But it's like once it's turned into a business, there's something nasty and malevolent about that, because it's no longer about the human relationship. It's like this abstract kind of pseudo relationship. And then
Yeah.
the organization, whoever they are, the financial organization, they hire people and pay them money to pretend to have a relationship with me and with you. And really, they don't. They talk about in corporate spheres about the relationship with the customer. These corporations have no relationship with people. And so,
Yeah.
and like you said, and then all of a sudden it's okay for them to just get rid of that, remove that entry from the balance sheet, just put it over the other side, and now it's gone, it's zeroed out, don't worry about it. And then I often remark at how everybody who works everywhere in the world for these financial institutions, as Graeber would suggest, carrying out these bullshit jobs, they all get paid anyway. Everybody gets paid. So if you owe 20 grand, apparently owe 20 grand to the Bank of Estonia, and you feel terrible about that and your inability to pay this 20 grand. Nobody in the Bank of Estonia thinks any little of you, any less of you. First of all, they don't know you.
Yeah.
And secondly, they're just doing their job. So it's no reflection on your morality or on your ability to be a human being as to whether or not you can pay back this 20 grand. Because nobody cares
Yeah.
about you. And then they call you in for a meeting and they sit you down. They say, now, Mr. Belkov, this is a really serious situation. And if you're going to need to enter into a restructured payment plan, and we'll do that for you because we're kind to you and we're your friend and all this kind of nonsense. And then you can't do it or you choose not to do it. And so they take you to court. But it's all moving the chairs around. It's all a game. Nobody cares about you.
Yeah.
Nobody has any negative sense of Dimitri Belkov. It's all just, a process. So you can walk
Number,
away
yeah.
from it.
Number.
Okay. You'll never see these people again. They don't care about you. They're not your family. They're not your friends. They're not anything. And so I suppose the message is, if there's anybody watching this or listening to this later and they find themselves in a difficult financial situation, what do we mean by that? Well, I've this obligation to repay some loan or pay something to this financial institution who don't give a shit about me anyway. So why should I give a shit
Yeah.
about paying them back? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
But
anybody worth having a relationship with will not be willing to take you to the edge of your life and see you jump over the cliff. Let me tell you a story. Now, there's no names or anything like that involved in this story, but it came back to my wife. She's a nurse, and she used to work in the hospital in Blanche, James Connolly, as it was called, Memorial Hospital. And story came home one time, probably about 10, 12 years ago, perhaps even more. It was a lot more than that. So it was around the time 2008, 2009 economic crash. And at that time, a lot of people were speculating on property. And so ordinary people like you and me, and people remortgaged their homes. They got loans really easy. It's like you put in an application today for 500 grand for a second house or an apartment in Bulgaria or something, and you got the money just like that, right? So people were doing all of this, and there was there's a story of a guy who was found dead in the Phoenix Park, slumped into a bench, and he wasn't asleep, and the person who found him, in fact, and this is how the story came back to me, was a nurse in Blanchardstown, and she was on her way to work or on her way home or whatever it was. Maybe she was out for a run, and she found this guy slumped into a bench, and she passed him the first time, and she kind of had a suspicion that something was up. But you know yourself, you kind of like, I won't go over. I feel a bit awkward. Maybe they're just having a sleep and I'm disturbing them, so I'll just leave them. But then on our way back, she noticed that, well, he hadn't moved and that it wasn't normal. Something was up here. So she went to him, and he was comatose and in a bad state. So they called an ambulance. Turns out, anyway, he died. And the story goes, and this is probably typical of other people at the time who found themselves in financial difficulty. He had speculated his home and so on other properties, and of course the financial crash landed, and the banks were looking for their money, and he couldn't find people for these properties and so on. So he was in trouble, and so they took all these properties back, and he still owed a load of money. And he figured that he was better off dead, and his wife could claim the insurance, and then all the debt would disappear, and that his family could survive. So this was a better option. So to take his own life was a more reasonable way to proceed than actually, such was his, I'm inferring here, but such was his connection between his sense of humanity and his morality with paying back this apparent money that he owed, that he was willing to take his own life to save his family. So this is the extent to which these banks will go to get their money back. And the extent to which people will go who work for these banks to get the bank's money, to get the bank's money. What are we talking? And it goes back to the question: what is money? So you sign the document, and now the money is created from thin air, and so it didn't exist in the first place. And so he took his life. He'd taken his mother's medication, and he just swamped the whole lot, and then he died. And so there's a lot of people do that. They throw themselves out of windows. They hang themselves, because the realization that maybe they fall apart. Maybe the whole sense of self is caught up in this idea of having to pay this money back, and that they're such a bad person now they can't possibly live. And this is what this system does to people. But that's okay, because we'll forget about them, and I was only doing my job, and tomorrow it'll be a new day and we'll get going again. And these banks and these institutions, they're ruthless in their pursuit. Ruthless. Like, people are on their knees especially during 2008, 2009. People were on their knees, and these banks were hounding them for this money. And lots of people took that step. So that's the dark side of it all. That's where it goes. That's the reality of it. And so it's great while this system is working. But then when these fuckers speculate themselves and break the system, they get bailed out, and people are left to struggle,
Yeah, well, that's exactly what happened, in 2008. The banks, as again, they are on an equal footing with the government, they got bailout. Well, of course, there was a need to restore the system, economic system as well. So the only hope was through the banks. But then the rest of the population who are not on equal footing, they were suffering. A lot of jobs were lost, and apartments, houses. People were on the streets. Oh, that's crazy.
Living in their
Because,
cars and
yeah. I think I heard somewhere that most of these houses that were foreclosed at that time, they were bought off by the BlackRock company, I suppose.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I think I heard it somewhere. And I
Well, they
watched a
do. They
video
buy
documentary or
these
something.
loans. They buy these properties off the banks for like a fraction of what they're
Yeah.
worth, and that's how these debt recovery companies work as well. So a bank might have, I don't know, 10,000 loans that they can't secure, or they can't recover, I should say. And so they sell these loans to these agents for like 10 cent in the euro or 10 cent in the dollar, and then this collection agency offers you, oh, we'll pay back 50% of the loan. We'll do a deal with you, like as if they're your best friend. And so you think this is great, and you agree to pay back 50% of the loan. Well, arguably the original contract is broken by virtue of the fact it's been sold to someone else. I'll wait for someone more qualified than me to kind of comment on that. But
Yeah.
so the agency makes, well, do the maths. So if they bought it for 10% of its value, so it's worth 10, so they bought it for 10 cent, and they convince you that they're doing you a deal, and you only have to pay back 50 cent. Well, then they're making 40 cent they're making 40% on their 10%, on their 10 cent. So the money is huge for them. It's despicable act. But anyway, that's the way they do it. There's one little story that I want to share with you. I don't know if you've heard it before. I first came across it in a podcast episode. I might have mentioned it before. Between Stephen Keynes, the Australian economist, Marxist economist, and Lex Friedman. There was a town, or there is a town in Austria called Vorgel. Have you heard of the Vorgel experiment?
No.
So in Vorgel, it was during the 1930s, and there was the Great Economic Depression, not only in the States but globally, and the town was screwed. They'd no money. There was no work. Everyone was out of work, and they were economically depressed. So the mayor, see if I can pronounce this surname correctly, Michael Unter Guggenberger, right? He decided to create money for the town. He decided the town would create their own money. But the money they created they call it Vorgel money or some derivative of that, it began to lose value over time. So every all the notes that were created required a stamp to remain valid, and so that encouraged you to spend it quickly. So you didn't hoard it. In order for it to keep the value, you spent it. So everybody was spending, and so
Yeah.
it brought the economy up. It allowed them, do infrastructure projects. People got work that didn't have work before. It injected this energy into the town or the small city. But the central bank shut it down because, well, apparently it threatened their control over the economy. What if every town, if every local community decided to create their own money, independent of the central bank, and do their own thing? Why
Yeah.
would that not work? You know? Or here's another idea: why would you not? Why would people not come together and create their own bank? There's a story of a guy, and you can get the movie. I'll get the name of it. I can't remember what it is now, but the guy in the north of England, he was a businessman. He owned a car garage, I think, and he created a bank, and he came up against a lot of resistance from the authorities, but he could do it. Anyone can do it,
Yeah.
and he created these loans for people at low or no interest or whatever it was. And it was a huge story. I think it was during the 90s.
Yeah.
Should really have that reference, but so the power aspect associated with money is a big thing.
Yeah. Well, I guess, with regards to the opening your own bank, I think it's possible. Yeah, I heard somewhere that basically everybody can open their bank, and as soon as they comply with the regulation of the central bank. So you
Yeah.
need to kind of have this permission, and you can basically set up your own bank so, from
Will we do?
tomorrow.
We'll get going on that, will we? We'll do that as a project.
Yeah.
Fund our
So
own
so
activity.
the other thing is that I'm kind of interested in it. It's related to the topic we talked probably throughout last couple of episodes. Is if the money even they serve as a fuel for this kind of uh, economy growth, for working conditions, to create the working condition and production condition. Uh, at some stages, we talked about so many unemployed people, and some people just work in useless jobs. I mean,
Mm.
do we still need to does this idea still serve as a stimulation for the working, for creating a working environment, a production environment? It seems to me now the only function of money is speculation and on financial markets and nothing else. Just so this whole accumulation of wealth and infinite economic growth and all this annual numbers, in the reports of the GDP growth, it's just pointless from this point of perspective, because well, it's my thought. Probably I'm right or wrong, I don't know, but I think there is something
Well, of course
to
you're
this
right. I
idea.
mean,
So
okay.
it's
So
never ending. The speculation will never end. So if the money is an abstraction, there is no end to it. But perhaps here I'm also not a qualified economist. Probably there is some limits to it. But it seems to me that you can do this financial speculation indefinitely, get your interest rates,
mm.
and you always kind of boost this system. You know? And
Well, we're
I probably won't, but yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean,
I,
I would agree. I mean, okay, we're not experts on the topic, but I mean, surely, every person is an expert on your own humanity. I mean, we know what it means to empathize and connect with another human being. That's what reality. That's our reality. And the further you move away from that reality, that you lend me €20 and I make the commitment to give that back to you next week. That's real. But where there's nothing, where there's no tangible something, whatever it is, connected to the agreement that we have, and you create this kind of illusion of a relationship, and an illusion of something. Then there's nothing really there. You look behind the curtain; it's like the Wizard of Oz. That it's all someone pulling levers and turning whatever it is,
so
and
yeah,
it's
like
all it's all an illusion, and it's okay. The corporates know this, but apparently we don't. We're on a whole other level of understanding when it comes to this sort of thing, and so we work these bullshit jobs, and we continue, and the story keeps going, and we move through boom and bust, and arguably some would suggest that there's another bust coming. It's only maybe year or 2 years away, not even years away, because well, the last one was 2008, and we had a mini one around. What was it? Just before COVID, wasn't it?
Mm.
With a mini collapse. But anyway, anything else to add on this topic before we wrap it up?
Well, pretty much. No, I think we've covered general ideas, and probably in next episode we can go and unfold
Yeah.
further stories about this topic within
We
this
get
topic.
into a bit more detail on some of these ideas, these theories of money, fiat money, the metalist view of money, money as a commodity, money as a moral obligation. One particular theory that's prominent at the moment is MMT. What's it stand for?
Modern monetary.
Modern monetary theory, which suggests that there's not the bank, or not the bank, the central bank or the country that controls its own currency can print however much money they want without there being a problem. It's somewhat revolutionary, but it's been around for a while apparently. Stephanie Kelton is a big advocate of modern monetary theory. She's probably the leading voice on the topic. Steve Keen is another voice on modern monetary theory. Brian Romanchuk, which is someone we hope to have a chat with soon on the topic, on his book of the same name. Modern Monetary Theory and the Recovery. I have it here. When was it written? Can't tell exactly. 2021. So we'll get into this topic a little bit more. We'll probably keep it alive for about 2 or 3 episodes. If you have any thoughts on the topic, give us a message in the section below there, whether you're on Substack or YouTube or anywhere else. Thanks for listening to this episode. We've been talking about money. This is episode 7. You can find all our writings and content and so on Substack. It's sundayletters.substack.com, and can subscribe below. There's a link. You become a paid subscriber, $5 a month. You can give us a once-off tip. You can subscribe for free. All of this stuff we create is for free in any regards. So, and you can buy merch as well. Thanks for listening, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
All right.